Welcome for the last session, not only for today but for the whole event. We have the last panel, which is basically about sustainability. Concepts for creating a sustainable work environment. We have Christina Collett here from Dresden Sommer. She's a global expert for learning and working spaces. We have Akis Tomatis from Forefront Group. And we have Dr. Ken Dooley from Haltian, Finland. He's the Chief Strategy Officer for Empathy Building. We heard them before. All of them had a session. I think no introduction is needed. We can jump into the first program or first question, basically. When it comes to the title, Concepts for Creating a Sustainable Work Environment, does any of you have anything to say? Do you have a concept in place at the workplace? Ken, maybe you can start.
Yeah, I used to be a sustainability consultant. I ran a consultancy team of sustainability guys for 6, 7, 8 years, and I actually have a PhD in sustainability. So I think it's a really difficult question. I think there's so much involved here, and I think definitely, commuting is such a big element. So really being able to support people to work from home, and it makes sense those people that are commuting a long way. That's one thing remote working and digital has really delivered, and allowing those people to kind of minimize their time in the workplace, I think makes lots of sense. And transport is such a big element. So I think that's a really good place to start. And I guess then it's about how do we encourage people to, to share cars, to cycle, to use public transport. They're the key elements. I've seen some really cool trends recently, which is like pop-up services in office buildings. So there are now these kind of mobile bike maintenance companies that kind of come in a van or come actually on an electric bike. And I've seen companies, so for example, in Finland, we wouldn't cycle that much in winter because it's so cold, but maybe March and April, you bring a guy or a lady in that maintains bikes. You do it for free for your staff. That gets them to kind of dust off their bike, and they cycle to work on the first day of the year. And you as an organization pay for the tune-up of their bicycle which they haven't cycled since the previous autumn. And it's a really nice way to kind of say, hey, it's cycling time. Hey, we're trying to help you reduce your carbon footprint. We're trying to help you to be more healthy. And I think really nice incentives like that, ideas like that, I think are really good. And they're things that I've seen, and I think I'm really proud of that it's happening in here at the moment.
Yeah, and I think there is another point. If you have people more working on different kinds of spaces, you also need less office spaces.
Yeah.
And I think you no longer need to build so many new buildings. You can use the other ones and refurbish them. And maybe you also have much more green spaces in the cities. And I think when you have the possibility to work more from home or from different places, you no longer need to live in the city. So this is another possibility to move further outside to the villages, and it's positive for both. So it's positive for the city because it's less crowded and has the possibility to have more green spaces and more attractive spaces in the city. But on the other side, it also gives the village some possibilities to develop further, because in Germany, lots of smaller towns or villages shrink and they lose their population. So I think it makes them maybe more attractive again. And this is also sustainable.
I mean, this is a big topic here in the UK at the minute, because the future of the high street, as I put it here, where, you have many shops, retail closing, and you walk down a kind of local town where there's, significant, maybe 30%, 25% of the street is closed. So what happens to these buildings? About recycling them, exactly as you're saying. Do they become places? You know, this whole idea of kind of co-working and flexible space, does that become a local location where people don't commute to London or Manchester or the big cities? It's, you know, it's a topic that is being exercised here in the UK a lot. In the UK, you have the complication of the planning system. So what can you do with buildings? Perhaps it's more complex here than it is in other places. And the only other thing I'd add to that is, of course, the location of where you work. You work in a business park in the middle of nowhere, as it were. That's a very different situation to working in the middle of London.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
your
but I think the
location
spaces could be in the future more attractive. So I think the maybe wrong concept was the garden city. And now we have more cities like yesterday somebody said smart spaces by UN Studio. So it's more outside where everything is, where people work, where people live, where the children go to school and to the kindergarten, and where all the facilities people need are. So you no longer need to go to a big city because you have a very nice and attractive neighborhood.
Yeah.
This is the difference between this and the garden city, because in the garden city you only lived, but you had to travel to work in a large city. And I think this is now garden city refurbished.
I think the high street's really interesting. We've seen a really cool trend here. It's really new, but it's almost around kind of hyper local services. So instead of an urban environment where you'd have a high street every 2 kilometers or something like that, it's kind of really simple technology and some really innovative services are bringing things kind of on your doorstep, things that are really comfortable to walk to. So, for example, we're seeing the kind of corner shop or the small grocery store, which in Finland has a kind of 2 kilometer grid. We're seeing that kind of come maybe 300 or 400 meters away, but now it's a fancy vending machine room, which in one way, from an employment point of view, isn't a good thing, but we're seeing it kind of, it's something you walk to. It's training people to not hop in the car, that you can walk to it. And in the same trend, which is a space, the vending machine grocery stores are a space with a smart lock and some security cameras and some really easy payment systems. We're starting to see the emerging of really local, hyper-local co-working, which essentially is an empty commercial space, maybe an old coffee shop with an app, with a smart lock and with some furniture. It mightn't even have a coffee machine if there's a nice store around the corner. And then essentially the grid of these small hyper-local co-working spaces are much closer than they were before. So you're walking from your home to them, you're meeting your neighbors that you kind of know from daycare or school or sports teams. And actually the kind of local community and are really helped by that as well. And again, it's a little bit of flexibility. It's a little bit of, we're spending more time in our neighborhood. And it's a tiny bit of technology, these really simple kind of smart locks. And I think the high street, as it slows down, could be replaced by 5 or 6 mini high streets dotted around that previous high street. And that's kind of an exciting element too.
Yes.
And I think people also move back into it. I mean, you know, you will get residential people will live back in the middle of towns, where again in the UK there's been that kind of move to the suburbs and out. You know, I think there's now that sense of what are we going to do with these buildings in the middle of cities or towns. So the refurbishment and recycling and the rethinking of what a building's about, you know, leads you to, you know, thinking about how smart a building is. You know, is it just a big bunch of bricks and a, you know, box, or is it a lot smarter than that? What does it do for you? So I guess if smart working is about fundamentally choosing where you work and the ability to choose where you work, I guess it directly has a very close connection to creating workplaces that are more sustainable.
Yeah.
And how would you, let's say, I know Ken might be the best person to answer about smart working questions, but maybe, Aki, how can you implement such a concept in a large organization, for example, if you can reflect on that, when you have people working in, you know, co-working places close to their working environment, how can you still keep them together and keep up the culture, let's say, within a company?
Well, if I knew the answer to that, it's not an easy question to answer. I mean, there is a lot of talk of, hub and spoke and, this sort of central space with outlying local, locations you can get to. And certainly some of the bigger organizations here have been doing that, both here in the UK and across Europe and globally. I think there's one thing I'd say, preface that to that is, a lot of this has been forced onto businesses through COVID and the pandemic. So I don't think anyone really knows the answers to anything yet. I think it's a work in progress, and to some extent, people are making it up as they go along. We've had clients who've gone down one direction of that sort of direction and then reversed, as it doesn't seem to work for them, because of course the key to this is that kind of human interaction. Clients who have been going, are people getting back to the office? Are they being asked to come back to create that cultural connection? It really changes. It really is so varying from client to client, and a lot of it really reflects the underlying culture of the business. We as a business ourselves have struggled with it as to, we're project orientated, so we like being together. We all want to be in the office because we work better and it's more efficient. But there's the obvious but that goes the other way. Sorry, Christine, I interrupted.
No, I interrupted you. I think what is also needed is to have the right tools, to have, as we discussed in this conference, to really have this hybrid work style in a good version, that it works very well if you are not really physically in a room, but maybe on a screen, so that you really feel connected, you feel belonging. And maybe when I think back, maybe it's a bad example, but when WeWork started in the very first beginning, they had lots of different kind of tiny, small co-working spaces, and they all looked a little bit the same. And the concept was that when you signed up for WeWork, you could work everywhere. You could work in the north of the city, in the south. You could work in a different kind of city or in a different country, and you always felt comfortable and belonging when you found your way, because everything was on the same place. And what they also had, they had a community like Facebook, where they really could exchange messages, they could have projects together. They found other users who wanted to work with them or design a project with them. So it was a really good community. Now WeWork is something different, but I think in the core, it has a little bit of what is needed in a company. You have to have the same structure in your office, so that everybody knows this is a kind of focus space, or this is a space for socializing, or this is a project room where I can use all the walls, and where I can move the furniture around like I need it. And we have a community online where we really could exchange each other, where we could plan, let's meet tomorrow face to face, or let's meet online the other day. So something which really connects people in real and physical spaces, but also in the virtual world. Maybe it's an ideal, but I think there's a core to it, which is, I think, right.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, we do have a loneliness epidemic in modern society. So anything that creates that kind of community is an important element.
Yes, and
you need to learn the rules of engagement. If you're in a situation where there are people online and there are people in front of you, the real people. How do you behave in that way? And there is a learning piece to that, about almost the etiquette of how that works, and how you that has a very serious impact in a way on how that successful that communication is.
Yeah, I think in Germany we have this word Spielregel. So it's a kind of rules you do in a workshop in a new office. So you together develop how you behave if somebody's 24 hours in the focus room. What do you say to him? So it's this Spielregeln. And
no, you'll have to post that one. I don't. That's
it's kind of the rules of engagement, isn't it? Or,
yeah.
or
something like this. Yes. And I think this has to be done in a playful way. And you also have to do this for the virtual world, because I think people were pushed to work virtually 2 years ago, and everybody did what he could do best. So use the tools, got to know Zoom and all these different kind of platforms, but nobody cared about these kind of rules. And I think this is needed now. When you want to work in a hybrid world, you have to have rules for face-to-face, for the office around environment, but you also have to have these kind of rules for the virtual world.
Yes, and when it comes to smart working, again, for Ken, maybe this question is right. We talked about commuting that would help keeping a sustainable work. Also, people staying more close to their living area. How can, for example, because I guess you work on this day-to-day basis, you're a digital twin, empathic building. Is it? Does it include, let's say, people who are working from home, from a co-working place, or is it only for the?
Yeah, we're really just focusing on that workplace experience. There's a lot of promiseware in our industry, so we're really trying to keep with something that is really mature and works and is developed. So we have the element to have a collaboration tool on our software, but it's not something I even present at these kind of events because it still needs a bit of refining. But one thing we do have is we have some virtual areas. So in our HQ, we have a kind of atrium, and we fill that in a fake floor. And essentially, it's a virtual coffee machine, and we share our location. And in there, there's a button you press that is a 24/7 Teams meeting. So the idea is that I move my avatar to that room, and then I'm communicating to everyone in the organization. I'm working from home and I'm having a break. I'm going to have a coffee or something like that. And then somebody can join me and people can see us taking a break in the virtual room. And the digital twin becomes this communication of our status. And one big thing is if you had a monthly meeting that your CEO was in, you could, at the end of that meeting, kind of walk out the meeting room with him and ask him a few questions strategically. And now we don't have those 2 minutes here and 2 minutes there. So we've tried to get our leadership to say, I'm going to be in the virtual coffee room on Tuesday mornings, and they would be there. And we tried to have 3 different rooms where one was a work clinic, where you actually asked detailed questions about work and you got 5 minutes each. One was 50-50 work social, and one room was completely social. So if you mentioned work, the fine was you had to buy beers the next time we were together. So just kind of communicating, I'm having a break as an employee, for your colleagues to say, hey, I'll join you. And then a cluster of people said, okay, it looks like it's fun, let's go in there. But then the alternative being the leaders being present for those 5-minute conversations once a week, and being able to just knock on their virtual door and them creating that space. So they're the things we've tried to do. I don't think our tool is perfect for it, but we're exploring these kind of communications of our working mode. I'm taking a break. I'll be over here. Come join me.
Yes.
Yeah, we had something similar. I presented it, I think, last time in Fleming at the conference. We built a virtual office in Mural with lots of different kind of floors and rooms. And we had it also for social meeting each other. So when someone had a birthday, we had this posted, and we had a music playing there, and we said to all, come and we celebrate this birthday of this person. Or we had a different room where we could exchange things, or we had a room, as you said, where we could meet more or less face to face and talk to each other. Or there was another room, this was the coffee break, And here you could drink coffee and say you want to have a tea or a coffee, and then you could chat with the other person. So it's far from your model, but it's an easy one. But I think it's necessary to have this bonding with the employees.
Yeah, I'll add one thing. People wanted to see who was in the meeting before they clicked join.
Yeah.
They wanted to say, oh, I want to speak to that guy, or I don't want to speak to that person, or, oh, there's 10 people in there, I'll join. Where if there's only one person on their own, they say, oh, I won't join, I'm too busy. But if there's lots of people, that sounds, I feel like I'm missing out, I'll join. So there's a kind of really interesting psychology around it. But for some reason, if you do have this virtual coffee machine or this virtual coffee team Zoom call, people want to peek inside before they join. So that's one thing we did with the avatars.
Yeah, but I think what is also important, this just came to my mind. I had this masterclass before, and I first gave a presentation, but then I wanted to work together with the people with moral, or I also offered to talk to them. And I could see there were 9 people in the room, but nobody responded, and I couldn't see anybody. So I think for some meetings, I think there must be a rule. You have to show up with a picture, and you have to put up your mic so that you could see the people and talk to the people. And maybe this is for Flemings for the next time. If you have a master class, maybe the rule is you have to get into this room, but be present with a picture and with your voice. So maybe this is
we have that rule. If you're at a meeting, you've got to have your camera on, and you can see what people are doing, basically.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and in a way, what we design is physical spaces, but I think going forward, you realize that actually, if the workplace is both physical and not physical, then in a way, if you're designing a workplace, you really need to be designing both. So, there's a real coffee area and a virtual coffee area.
Yes.
And actually, if you're properly designing a solution for a client, both are very connected and very relevant. And in a way, you can't work in isolation anymore. So that whole interaction of technology with the physical space and obviously the people, I think the pandemic has kind of rammed that home to everyone to go, you've got to address these things simultaneously. They are not individual things that work in silos. They interact. So, when you think about a working interior, it's now a virtual one as well as a physical one.
Absolutely.
Yes. Let's finish with the last program element. In the meantime, I encourage all the viewers to ask questions in the comments or chat section, or even connect live. That's the best solution always. It doesn't even have to be a question. Maybe you know something better than our current panelist, or you found a solution to some of the questions that we raised. So please connect. And so the last item is how to make the right choices when designing, sourcing, and developing an interior. So this might be a more designer architectural question. Does any of you have a question? I guess this is also pretty much sourcing price question. How would you approach this?
I think, as always, you have to involve the people. You really have to know the organization where you work with, and you have to know the different activities this company has, the processes they work, and what kind of people they are. So you really have to understand this. So I think you have to have a workshop in the beginning where you really develop a vision and together with the people of this organization, and work with them on a strategy and really know what they need. And you have to understand what they do, and then you can plan the right spaces for them. And it always has to be authentic.
Yeah, and just to add to that, very often, what a client might think they want isn't really what they need. And that conversation is really at the heart of that, which is to get a proper brief, to actually, spend the time to discuss the alternatives, the what ifs, because otherwise you often end up replicating or the temptation is to replicate something existing. So, you know, the leadership of that business plays a big role then. So, you know, getting them, persuading them to engage in that process, and actually think about alternatives, think about, you know, a different way perhaps of being within a space. And I do think the pandemic has helped that, because they've had to. And I think it's opened a few minds and a few eyes as to, well, actually, maybe we can do things differently, not least, you know, remote working and the likes of that.
Yeah.
In terms of picking, you know, items, so the, you know, sustainability question about making the right choices in designing, for example, do you have any experience on that, or any thoughts?
Well, I guess it's certainly, in terms of things like furniture, for instance, that, you know, that world has been focused on recycling for some time, and, you know, it's generally got its act together when it talks about that, and it's been driven to it by clients. But yes, I mean, I think more and more, I would say, in conversations with clients, the issue of sustainability has gone up the agenda of, you know, when you look at a product, when you look at a life cycle, for instance, on a product or an interior, all those elements are now part of a design process, as opposed to a nice to have, that some clients might consider. It's by no means everyone, but it's certainly a lot higher up the agenda.
Yeah, and I think you also could think about sharing furniture. So no longer buy it, but share it. So if companies changing or over the lifespan, you decide, no, this furniture nobody uses, so we exchange it. So it's much easier if you have shared furniture, when you can exchange it much more easily, and this is also more sustainable. So it's the same concept, sharing.
Yeah, and I think one really quick point around this area as well is, you know, again, there's a lot of technology and promises around energy efficiency, but still office buildings are, you know, the lighting and ventilation and these machines are auto set to turn off on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the same day. We don't understand if people work later on Fridays or Thursdays or Wednesdays. And I think with the kind of Gen Z conversation as well, of people wanting to start working at noon and these kind of things, that only gets more complicated. So with the kind of data we have, we kind of need to get better at that as well. We're just starting to get that kind of data. I don't think we're going to have smart buildings solve it, because the vast majority of our buildings are really old. But the data we're generating in these kind of discussions, we will get better at using that from an energy perspective.
Yeah, and another point, I think we have to see that an organization is a living organization, and it's never ready. So it's changing over the time, all the time. So it's not only COVID, there might be something new in a year or something, or the company is changing. So I think you have to see that also the furniture, the spaces, the rooms, the people, they're always changing. And the organization always has to adapt to these other conditions. And this is what you have to see. It's never ready. You always live in better.
Yes. Enver had Enver is trying to connect, because he had a comment about recycling. Hi, Enver.
Hi. Just wanted to share something.
Yes.
The recycling, because it also requires some energy consumption, because we need to take something, tear down to its particles, and then combine and to make something. Instead, we can think about the option upcycling, using the things with different purposes, needing less energy. If possible, it is more sustainable. One.
Yes. Yes.
Second, I wanted to share, we are making this hybrid office transformation, is renewing our offices, and we use our existing furnitures for some social responsibility projects to some village schools and some other places. They are still in good condition. For the once they're not in good condition, we make some repair and send it to some rural areas where they still continue to use them. It may be a good option to support these type of things, actions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we see a lot of that as well, particularly, as you say, with things like furniture, being able to upcycle it, send it somewhere else, whether it's a school or just a different kind of usage for it. So yeah, that's definitely part of all considerations now.
Thank you for that. We also came to the end of our session and end of the whole event. So thanks for the current panel, for sharing your thoughts and ideas. Thank you for the other speakers as well in the last 2 days, and the audience as well. Many of you I know will be watching this from replay. So I hope we could deliver valuable content to everybody. Thanks for all the audience questions and comments as well. And hopefully next time, we're planning 2 events next year, one in Berlin, one in Amsterdam. Hopefully it will be live, fingers crossed, and hopefully see you then. See you soon.
Thanks, folks.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.